All right, welcome back to the Watch It Before You Die podcast. My name is Brian. I'm here with Ben, and this week we have watched the movie Down by Law. It's a 1986 movie directed by Jim Jarmusch, and let's jump into it. Ben, tell me something good about this movie. Tell me something bad about this movie. How do you feel about this movie?
I have virtually no feelings about this movie. That's what this movie did to me.
It's just that good for you, huh?
Let me paint a picture for you. So I watched the movie.
Good first step.
And it started slowly.
Correct.
And I thought it could get better. So then I put it on 1.5 times. And it did not get better. In fact, I then put it on 2 times, and it still did not get better. This movie, for me, it elicited nothing, and I mean that in really the most like transparent way possible. This film did nothing for me.
Yeah.
It did not. There was no story plot points that I enjoyed. There was no humor that I thought like, woo, like that's good. Mm-hmm. There was no character that like really kind of sucked me in. You know, like I feel like every movie has bad characters that you're like, I'm uninterested in that character.
Sure.
But there's normally a character, even if it's a side character, that you're like, I am a fan of that. Mm-hmm. Like, for instance, if you're a Star Wars fan, we've talked about Star Wars before on this podcast, but like episode 1, a lot of people don't like episode 1, but there was that vast majority of people that are like, we watched it for Jar Jar Binks. You know what I mean? Like it was just, you know, it's like one of those kind of characters that like, they don't relate really, but they keep you engaged in the film.
Well, this movie had a Jar Jar Binks.
This movie didn't have one.
This movie had a Jar Jar Binks.
It did. There
are 3 characters in the movie.
He didn't do anything for me.
There are 3 characters in the movie. There's Zach, there's Jack, and there's Bob. Bob is Roberto.
Yep.
I'll disagree with you.
Italian man.
He is a strange Italian man. I'll disagree with you. I think Bob deserves an award. I think he, like, if there's a redeeming part of this film, I think it's Bob.
Well, here's the thing. This is what I will say for Bob's character and Bob's acting. I don't know if anybody told Bob what film he was actually signing up for. You know, you hear those stories of like, my agent just told me I got a part, so I showed up to the set and I just rolled with it. I feel like that is like, I don't know the name of that actor, but I feel like that's Bob. Yeah. Like somebody told him he was going to be in like some type of comedy, like slapstick comedy film, black and white film. And he came with his all, and nobody actually needed him to bring all of that.
Sure.
In fact, they're like, you're on the wrong set. That film's down the hallway. We're here to bore you into tears. Literally, I wanted to cry. I thought, we have a podcast, so it's my job to finish this film.
Yep.
But what I wanted to do was cry.
I have to admit, I want to disagree with you a little bit just because I loved Bob. I really liked Bob.
Bob did it for you.
But what I'm going to say is in my notes 3 times I have written down how slowly the pacing of this movie is.
Yes.
This movie opens slow with a song.
Yes.
It begins slow. It gets off the blocks slow. It develops slow. It ends slow.
Even like the action points are slow.
It was slow.
Like how, okay. And this is when we put a spoiler alert in. How are we going to get a man getting set up for, you know, underage trafficking, basically, and then another man getting set up with a body in the trunk, and I still don't, it's still slow somehow. Like, how have you made plot points that, like, thick and that, like, rich, if you would put it in a different context? And I mean, it just still be like, well, that happened. You know what I mean?
Let's extrapolate it even further. We're in jail for many weeks, many days, and there's a jail break. And we don't see any of that. We skip over that. We don't need that part. We see in the jail cell, and then we see on the lam, right? Those are the only 2 things we see. We don't see the escape. We don't see any of the action.
And here's what's crazy is I thought maybe I'm missing the point. You know, sometimes I'm not like intellectual enough for some of these films. So I'm like, I'm going to go do some extra research. So I went and read about the film as well. And the director's whole point was he wanted to make a film that focused on the characters, not on the action. Okay, well, then you're going to have to write better characters because Bob's all that you got. Tom Waits looks like he didn't even know he was a part of a film.
Yeah.
He thought he was writing a record and they put him inside of a jail cell with some other strange man. I just don't. Some of these films, this is my criticism. We've criticized the list before. This is not our list. Some of these films, I cannot grasp why they've made it on this list.
Sure.
Now, some of our more controversial ones, I understand. Like they're there because the controversy surrounding them, the stir that it caused when they were released at the time, it makes sense. Like they're on a list because they're like significant, even if for the wrong reasons. Mm-hmm. A film like this, I'm not sure how it was significant enough. Like I've seen films like this. They're normally the ones that like pop up on TV and you go, all right, I'm good. And you move on after like a minute.
Right.
How has it made it onto a list as influential as like movies you should watch before you die?
Right. Well, I'll defend it a little bit. I'm not giving it a good score. I'm gonna go ahead and spoil that. Like, for me, I'm really happy that I have watched that movie. Like, I watched it about a week ago, and the nostalgia of like having it in my brain and being like, I watched that movie, and I'm glad that I watched it. But as far as when I was watching it, I was doing the same thing as you, where I was like, no, tough it out on 1 speed, tough it out on 1.5 speed. Okay, we're just going up to 2 and see if anything happens, and maybe I'll watch it again. And it's just really slow pacing, and you know. The actors, if I have to give them any credit, if I have to defend this movie, what I think is the actors actually do a really good job of like, they don't like each other. They don't want to be friends, and they just kind of happen to be friends because of proximity. And it's uncomfortable. And I think they do a good job of acting uncomfortably, which some might say is a bad thing because it makes the audience feel uncomfortable, right? Like they're not talking, they're not telling you anything. And the scenes, because they're so slow and they're so drawn out, it really feels like you're in prison with them. And I was
in prison.
I think the cinematography was great. I think they picked some shots, like they did multiple shots that I was impressed. I think I was watching on like 720p, like it wasn't even the highest quality. And I was looking and I was like, man, this black and white looks crisp. Like it looks really, really good. And so if I have to sing its praises, I'll sing its praises for cinematography. And I think like the acting wasn't forced to be like, and then they become best friends and they skip off into the sunset. And again, I just really love Bob. I think he was hilarious. But like the Anthony Jeselnik looking Zach dude looked like he was always kind of making a like a kissy face, like kind of a stern face. And then
he was going into modeling after this film.
I think Tom Waits is probably a better musician and director than actor. And so in this movie, it struggled to be perfect for me.
Unless Tom Waits was just playing himself and that was like an actual version of it. Then to be fair, I think then he's nailed it because he didn't seem any different than like interviews I've seen with Tom Waits about music. Like it's just him in a film.
So I thought it was interesting. I thought it was good that I have watched it, but would I recommend that somebody watch it before they die? My answer's got to be no. Like, I don't think that this belongs on the list.
No. Okay, well, you seem to have a higher standard for it. You did say you weren't going to give it a great rating, but what is your rating for it then if you want to reveal that to us?
I think for me, I'm going to give this a 3.5.
Okay. Alrighty.
I've defended all the points that I can defend. The bottom line of it is, and I'm the ultimate like rewatchability guy. I don't want to rewatch this movie. Like if somebody ever makes a reference to it or is like, hey, have you seen this? I can say yes. And I'm happy that I have seen it, but I am not signing up to invite people over or watch this with my wife or anything like that. Like, let's not watch this movie again.
Right. I think for me, my rating will have to be like a 2.9.
Okay.
Because on the grand scale of the movies we've seen, excuse me. Sorry, I'm overcoming the flu. On the movies we've seen, I gave Last Chance for a Slow Dance 3.0. And I think I would rather rewatch Last Chance for a Slow Dance than this film. You actually
gave Last Chance for a Slow Dance a 1.2. I gave Last Chance a 3.
You gave it a 3.0. Okay, well, I would change my score, but it's too late. It's solidified.
No, you can change it now.
Okay, 1.1 then.
1.1.
If I gave Last Chance, because I would rather watch, because at least Last Chance for a Slow Dance was comedic in nature.
Yeah.
Like I thought it was funny, even though it was never intended to be funny. So I could, and it was shorter. So I could rewatch that knowing like I'm going to at least get a little giggle out of it because it's so bad. So that's where I'm at. I thought I was ranking it fairly considering my other scores.
Sure.
Turns out I was going to give it a big boost and it didn't deserve that. So
I'll open the floor for you to go a little bit lower if you'd like.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I misread the chart before I prepared for this podcast. So
all right. So with a 1.1 from you, 3.5 from me, that brings the average score to 2.3.
2.3. Yeah. I think somehow Tree of Life is still better than this film in the grand scheme.
Tree of Life,
the grand scheme of it,
is a 2.8 average, so it's got 0.5 points on it.
That's fair. I think that's about what it would be comparatively.
I mean, if they both had something in common, they dragged on too long, and the cinematography was probably the high point.
Yeah,
of both movies,
and they had like maybe one redeemable actor in the entire thing. So there you go. So a 1.1 for me and a 3.5 for you, you said?
Yep. Unfortunately, it doesn't sound like the Watch Before You Die podcast recommends that you watch this movie before you die. We think this is a skip. You can just go right on
unless you loved it and you want to tell us about it in the comments, because often when we give very low scores, those are when people flood into our comments to defend a specific film. So maybe we need to watch more bad films. That's in our opinion.
Just hate on us down in the comments.
What are we watching next? Because I specifically remember our last episode, I said, I'm excited for this film. Maybe it's going to be another good one.
Yep.
And I was wrong. So maybe we'll get another good one.
All right. Good news for everybody. We have 1,220 potentially terrible movies left on the list.
Yeah.
And this week's random number is an old one. It's a 253. We're going way down the list.
1930s, 1940s,
1950s.
1950s.
253 is, a 1952, Singing in the Rain.
Okay, I can get behind this. Now, Singing in the Rain is one I have seen before. Gene Kelly, Debbie Reynolds. It's actually the last time I watched this film was in high school chorus class. So I don't remember it. I don't really remember much of it, but I remember vaguely enjoying it as like a sophomore in high school. So maybe it will be a good rewatch. I do like a musical. I'm a fan of musicals, especially older musicals. I think modern musicals don't do much for me. Older musicals, I am a big fan of. So, well, Singing in the Rain, that's a good role.
That's a good role. It's a classic. I think everybody's not everybody's heard of it, but most people, it's pretty culturally famous, and a lot of people have watched this movie. It's rated G. It's an hour and 43 minutes. Looks like it's available on HBO Max with a subscription, and available for rent on Apple TV, Amazon, Google Play, YouTube, all sorts of places. And
most likely you can find this one in like a local library, or if you have a library card, there's a lot of websites out there where you can use your login. We often do that. We take advantage of the free system to make this podcast available.
Yeah, support your local library.
Accessible. Yeah, definitely. So, all right, Singing in the Rain. I'm excited for that one, and I look forward to reviewing that one here in the coming weeks. So, this has been the Watch Before You Die podcast. We will see you next time.